Greetings and welcome to Sports 101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here at Sport 101, we expand our conversation to include the history, past, and in the making, while we also look at the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please make sure you get social with Sports 101 and the litany of SportsZone Chicago's other shows on social media. You can follow SportsZone Chicago on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Please remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show as well as the variety of other shows by keeping up with breaking news. And if you miss a show, don't worry about it. You can find it on our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, we want everyone to download the app. Our app can be found on any social media by looking under the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Remember, when you do that, please search SportsZone Chicago. Now let's talk about tonight's episode. We're going to feature today the fiercest women in martial arts, Frieda the Cheetah Gibbs, also known as the Lady Jack Johnson. If you look at our title picture right here, this is Frieda when she was in her boxing career. She's done multiple sports, and we're going to dive into her in this show, so please stick with us. Again, I want to start off in honor of Black History Month and just talk about women trailblazers before we get to our feature. Black athletes, or in particularly Black female athletes, are having a cultural moment across the entire American sports landscape. You got Serena Williams, who's kind of conquered the women's tennis game with 23 Grand Slam titles. She's the most accomplished tennis athlete, that's male or female, the sport has ever had in the open era. And don't forget her off-court ventures, her clothing line, her tennis apparel that she even plays in, and other business ventures she's done has been quite successful as well. When you look at the WNBA, we have such trailblazers as Maya Moore and Candace Parker. When those two women entered the league, viewership increased by 35%, and particularly during the 2018 campaign. You have Notre Dame guard Arika Ogunbowale and her back-to-back buzzer beaters in the 2018 NCAA Women's Tournament. That kind of put that tournament on the map with more notoriety. Everyone was watching the tournament. However, with exciting plays like that, buzzer beaters that you find almost constantly or consistently in the men's game, it kind of made the women's tournament a little bit more exciting versus, UConn or one of the powerhouses just blowing everyone out. Then we have Simone Manuel in swimming, what she's done on a national stage. And Clarissa Shields is also a professional boxer. That's an African-American woman. We even have a professional wrestler, Sasha Banks, who's representing women in the sport that a lot of Black women haven't got into or achieved the notoriety that Miss Banks has had. Angela Hill, if you look at our picture right here, she's a UFC fighter. And as a mixed martial art event, when she goes to, she makes sure that she makes contact with any women of color, and particularly Black women, whether they're colleagues in UFC or they're just spectators. She makes sure she shakes their hands, introduces herself, because she wants younger fighters to not talk about the bridges that she's gone through. Excuse me for neglecting to mention Simone Biles, who is a tremendous trailblazer in gymnastics, and her feats with the United States women's gymnastic team, and also her training centers now where she's training future women to be United States athletes. So thank you, Maya, for that. Again, Hill makes it a habit to say hello to everyone and reach out so she can embrace these women and feel comfortable in a space where they don't see a lot of people that look like them. She's oftentimes been quoted as saying that she sees younger women as a version of herself, and she realizes how just one small act of kindness can help them get over so many hurdles that they have to go through as underrepresented women in mixed martial arts. Hill, she has a very unique story, as before she was a mixed martial artist. She was simply an artist. This PG County native, she graduated from New York's Copper Union School. And Copper Union School is known for its artist work, either in graphics design or in art, now in CAD, computer animated design and drafting. So she had dreams of becoming an animator and working for a big studio, working on a cartoon or an animated series. She's an avid fan of cartoons and cosplay, and some of her favorite characters she likes to envision are Dawson from Street Fighters. You see her right here, and she also likes to dress as Afro Samurai, and that's another picture of again her. She goes to cosplay events all around the country when she gets a chance when she's not fighting in the UFC. Um, Again, she started training Muay Thai, while working at an animation studio. And her combat sports career evolved because the studio began laying off employees in 2008 when there was a major recession in that industry. Um, she began to practice Muay Thai and eventually actually went over to Thailand and studied Muay Thai and came back. Um, and that kind of propelled her going to the UFC. So in 2014, Angela Hill joined the UFC, and she became the first African American woman to sign in the promotion's history. Now that's big, being this was in 2014, and UFC was on its way. I remember in 2005 in graduate school at Grambling State University, we had a class, and one of the sports that we did that we thought could make it and be the next big sport in this country was UFC. As again, if you look at any of the writings from Rome, when the society begins to get at its zenith, the sports become more violent and brutal. So we actually saw and envisioned UFC coming about. So in 2014, that's kind of late in the game to get its first African American woman. So again, UFC and Dana White in June of 2014 announced that Hill was one of the fighters selected to appear on the show they have called The Ultimate Fighter. This one was a champion will be crowned. They have a different theme every year. And in her season, 2014 season, she faced Carla Esparza in a preliminary round and lost. She lost to a submission hold, and obviously she was eliminated. Coming from a Muay Thai background, which is more kicks, her ground and pound wasn't quite where it needed to be for UFC. So she often struggled at the beginning of her career, going to the ground, wrestling, and in submission moves. She had another UFC fight where she fought Rose Namajunas in UFC 192 on October 3rd of 2015. Again, she lost this fight by submission. Often what fighters would do is they would stay out of range of her kicks and kind of circle or counter circle her. So that way they can get in range and strike her. So that way they can be in close proximity and stay away from the Muay Thai elbows or the clinch that Anderson Silva made so famous, and coming from the side and just kind of get her on the ground and the submission holds. So this was another fight she lost by submission. And at this time in 2015, if you lost 2 fights in this particular manner, you were subject to be expelled from the company. And Angela was released from UFC after this fight. So being released, she signed with the rival Invicta FC. This was the rival to UFC at this time. Moving forward in 2021, they are not the same anymore, as UFC has permeated that market, and Bellator would be the triple A to the UFC's Major League Baseball, if you get that analogy. So she made her debut at Invicta FC 15 in January of 2016, and she got a first round TKO over Alita Gray. So she gained this TKO again because Invicta, it was a smaller fight league than UFC, and also she had been working on her ground game. So that helped her tremendously as she got used to the same defenses that fighters were giving her. So less than 2 months later, on March 11th of 2016, she knocked out a former strawweight challenger, Stephanie Egnick, in the second round. So she fought strawweight, which is one of the smallest weights that's under 100 pounds. So oftentimes these women, the fights were very fast and quick. And again, they would take advantage of her at the beginning of her career by getting on the ground. But she learned how to use her speed to defend that and actually got better in her ground game. She had another quick turnaround. Her goal was, again, to get back to the UFC. So she had to outfight anyone, anywhere type of stance at this time. And she faced the undefeated strawweight champion, Livia Renata Souza, for a title at Invicta FC. And she won that fight in split decision. And she became the new Invicta strawweight champion. After that, she faced Ashley Yoder on July of 2017 at the Ultimate Fighter 2025 final. She won this fight by unanimous decision. And again, she was getting to the pinnacle of getting back to the UFC and as the Invicta FC strawweight champion. Gaining interest back into UFC, she had her next fight with Randa Marcos. And subsequently after that, she decided to retire. So she had 16 fights in the UFC, around 8 to 10 fights in Invicta. And as you know, oftentimes as pitchers have a pitch count, fighters have a fight count. And particularly some of the smaller fighters, because in UFC, they're not wearing headgear and they're taking all these explosive punches, which, as we know, jar brain matter, which cause concussions, and you just get wore down from fighting so much. So oftentimes fighters, when they get close to 20 fights, they'll end up retiring in their career. Obviously, she got to close to 20 so fast because she was taking fights quickly. Most people will fight once or twice a year, and she was doing it every 3 months, again, with a goal of trying to get back to UFC. So she had a great run, and currently now she is still working back on her animation and different things. So I would like to give a shout out to Angela Hill. So before we go to break, I would just like to talk about our feature, or I would like to show this video on our feature guest, Frieda Cheetah Gibbs, excuse me. So this is an introduction video on Frieda, and we'll play this and we'll have a quick discussion afterwards.
I was once known as the most dangerous woman in the world in Thai kickboxing. I fought countless number of battles, producing the same results. Many thought I was gifted, others thought I didn't have the talent to make it. Let me share the story of how Frieda the Cheetah Gibbs, the most dangerous woman in the world, came to be.
champ is here. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Get your hope to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my champ is here. Kick to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Get your hope to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Get your kick to the gym as a rep. Count to 10.
Who's next to step up so she can get clowned by Frieda, the Cheetah coming in, throwing weight around 140 pounds, 20 wins, 19K downs, 4 titles, back my name, spread my reputation round. The first African American female, ISKA, know the story's not a fairy tale. Fighting my way through all the record books, using kicks, jabs, uppercuts, and left hooks. When I started out, I was searching to find myself, couldn't find myself until I got a book off the shelf. I started reading, learning my lesson, took time to find God, now I can count my blessings. I realized I was so much more than I had wished for, not just a plaything the fellas adore. In the kickboxing world, I could be so discreet. My style and technique was oh so unique. I stood undefeated, one draw and only one. When I had an exhibition with someone, my son, known to whip fast like Van Damme and Bruce Lee. Hey Wesley, they need to make a movie all about me. Known to whip fast like Van Damme and Bruce Lee. Hey Wesley, they need to make a movie all about me.
The champ is here.
The champ
is here.
is here.
The champ is here.
Frieda,
The Cheetah. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Get your hook to the gym as the rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a kick to the gym as the rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a hook to the gym as the rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a kick to the gym as the rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a hook to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a kick to the gym as the rep. Count to 10.
is here.
The champ is here.
Frieda,
The champ is here.
Cheetah, yeah. The champ is here. No other girl could beat me, Frieda. No woman could defeat me. They tuck their tail between their legs and they ran whenever they beat me. Sexy, deadly, quite strong,
The champ is
but in
here.
the ring,
The champ is here.
I ain't humble.
The champ is here.
I ain't humble. You wanna test me?
The champ is here.
Frieda, the Cheetah.
So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a hook to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a kick to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a hook to the gym as a rep. Count to 10. So what's up? Test your luck, take a chance, my friend. Catch a kick to the gym as a rep. Count to 10.
This is for you, Chester, PA,
Frieda,
New York,
Cheetah,
ATL, LA, Texas,
Frieda,
Germany,
Cheetah,
France, Amsterdam, Mexico, Australia, Africa. This is for you.
Frieda, the Cheetah.
Again, so I was talking with my producer before the show, and just we were talking about how most people don't know about Frieda, and in the video they made a reference saying, but she was before Ronda Rousey, and you look at her competing not only in one martial art but also boxing, playing basketball, running track. It's clear that she was the more dangerous athlete, especially when we found out that Ronda's matches were actually fixed for her to win.
You know, I didn't know anything about Frieda Gibbs until someone tagged me in a post about her. And I was like, oh, okay. And again, here's another person. Like last week it was Tony. And I was like, didn't know about her. But she's a multi-sport athlete. The amount of discipline that she must have had. I mean, track, basketball, but we know that mixed martial arts really requires a whole level of training that's different than any of those sports. And the fact that she could be so dominant to me was amazing. And again, never heard of her. Like the first woman that ever really got promoted was Ronda Rousey. And I'm going to say maybe the reason, I think everything's about timing, because maybe if she's here right now performing, you know what I'm saying? Like if her career was maybe happening now, maybe we'd know more about her.
Well, a lot of people with wrestling, and again, one of my classmates from Iowa, Ator Ewing, most people know him as Big E Langston. He is in the WWE. And not only him, but other people have spoke of the quote-unquote Hulk Hogan complex, where certain people have been featured. If you look back into later years in wrestling, when the Rocky Johnson, Junkyard Dog days, when a lot of people said that certain promoters would put certain gigs or characters in the black wrestlers because it was a pecking order in who they would promote. So I can't necessarily say that is accurate for this case, but I do believe that I don't think she'd be marketed as such, because a lot of people don't know about the WWE Women's Champion right now.
Who's that? See?
So again, oftentimes the marketing in these women is sort of like the other sports, where it's, the old school quarterback mentality. Or, yes, the blonde hair, blue eyed, most marketable guy.
Well, I think it's interesting it's interesting because, you've got UFC, MMA, and then you've got WWE, which is sort of like soap operas for men. I'm sorry, fellas. I know you don't want to hear me say that it's a soap opera. It's soap opera for men. It's not real. So everything about that, I've seen, it seems like women have a role in that because it's entertainment, so to speak. But what's interesting about the UFC, I mean, I feel like there's a push to promote like Amanda Nunes. I feel like you hear, she does commercials, you kind of see her. I can't tell you the last time she fought, though. I have no idea. But I do feel like she is kind of given a spotlight since Ronda Rousey. And actually, the girl who defeated, what's her name? Who defeated Rousey? Holly, I'm drawing a blank on her last name.
Forget her last name. She did it pretty bad, too.
I mean, she did, but then she's not a dominant fighter because she didn't go on to be dominant. Matter of fact, she came across somebody else who just totally actually laid her out. So to me right now in the UFC, I mean, there's a lot of talented women, but no one's as dominant. And I kind of feel if legitimately, if Frieda was in there right now and if she was as dominant as she was when she was actually in the sport, I think it would be hard, especially within that fan base. They seem to respect when someone is legitimately talented. You know what I mean? Now, Dana White's a whole nother story.
Now, I think one thing that will help Frieda in this current time is her weight class. She's not fighting in straw weight as Angela Hill did. She's in a bigger weight class. So therefore, it'd be more exciting because it's more powerful punches instead of the fast flurries, that some of the smaller fighters use in their tactics, when this is more like a quote unquote men's fight where you see people try to knock people out.
Right. So yeah, she was aggressive. She had power. I mean, her kicks, I was like, geez, that lady, I was like, and finally they called the fight. So, it's sad that her career is unbeknownst to people. But it was interesting because clearly somebody knew who she was, because they showed all the celebrities in the video that, had met her, like Matt Damon, Master P, all kinds of people. So maybe people who were fans of the sport knew who she was.
Yeah, well, in the fighting world, and I'll talk about this after break, she grew up in mixed martial arts. She had an uncle that trained with one of the famous Muay Thai fighters, and she got to know people that way. And then when she started winning, like I said, she went to boxing and trained with Freddie Roach. When she did her movies, sometimes she would spar with different people. So to get him in shape, she sparred with Denzel Washington before. So that's how she got, and then just meeting different people that way. So. Okay.
So that's how she kind of had that kind of access to celebrities, because, you think about what she was doing this back in the 80s, 90s. It isn't like, I mean, again, UFC is not what it is now. I mean, it's the way it's promoted. But what's interesting, and I'd be curious, because I know she has an autobiography. The thing about UFC, the actual athletes, is that they don't make much wealth from being in the UFC.
Yeah, it's their endorsements.
They're grossly underpaid. It's their endorsements. But, Dana White, being the very controlling individual that he is, literally, but their endorsements, they have to work those things outside the ring, because Dana White will not let any advertisement inside the ring that isn't UFC, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts the athletes, like, they can't put trunks on that is their advertiser. They can't do that. So it's like, to build any kind of wealth outside of being a UFC fighter, they have to, get that type of advertising. It'd be interesting, especially with her skill set, how that would play off. I mean, Ronda Rousey did relatively okay, but what was interesting is she was set to be in the remake of Roadhouse.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was right, Roadhouse. That seems right. And that's when she lost the fight. Done. It was like, and what's interesting? It's like, you have plenty. I mean, you look at Conor McGregor, who obviously has lost plenty of fights, but it hasn't given him the inability to still make money.
Exactly. And one thing that Frieda did was, and I'll talk about that again later after break, she ultimately ended up leaving UFC and start professional boxing.
Okay.
For monetary, and that was one of the reasons, because of she was in UFC years ago when it was just fledgling, and Dana White was more controlling with his funds. So she wasn't getting the money that the fighters are getting now. So, and then being a woman fighter, she was getting paid less for that. So she already ended up leaving and went to boxing.
Yeah. So, and again, it's that conversation about women in sports that are predominantly male. It's taken a while for women UFC fighting to really kind of take hold and grow, because people had to get past the shock and awe of how, because UFC is aggressive.
Yeah.
It is. It's brutal. I mean, you see people bleeding and all over the place, and you're like, why is this interesting? But it's kind of like when you start watching, you can't look away. It's that kind of sport. But you can look at them and you can tell the skill level. And I was watching her, and I was like, to me, she had a good balance of the boxing piece along with her like Muay Thai as well. She had a good balance to it. Where we talked about earlier with Angela Hill, where she struggled. Yeah. With the boxing piece of what she was doing.
Angela was so small that if you don't know wrestling, you're going to go down easily. Where Frieda, you can see her taking people down. She was aggressive with it because she was more comfortable in her quote unquote ground and pound game.
Right. So yeah, very interesting. I'm gonna have to snag her autobiography and check it out. I'd be curious, because she alluded to the fact that she clearly had a lot of obstacles growing up, that she grew up, obviously in poverty, that she was bullied. And I think I heard something about she took a big stance on bullying, in her, when she would go out and do public things to kind of, put a light on that issue. So I'd be curious to hear a lot about her background, like what really kind of was sports that outlet that helped her to get away from some of the things that, she was struggling with. Is that kind of where she was at basketball and track, but then, like you said, her father was kind of the martial arts piece to it. So.
Yeah. And then again, being in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is outside of Philadelphia, that's one of those areas where it is bad, but oftentimes I call them copycat cities. So just think of areas outside of Chicago or trying to quote unquote prove themselves. And she's from that area, wasn't quite a lot of jobs. And again, at that time, being a woman, playing male sports with all males in the 70s, you're going to get far more ostracized than you are now. So a lot of people don't quite understand that the time frame in which she was doing this, where it was the liberation was starting to come in, but on her socioeconomic level, it wasn't quite there yet. So it was, why are you doing this? You can be sewing or knitting or cooking or preparing something, and why do you want to be a boy? So
right.
She faced a lot.
Okay, so yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to hear more about her in the second half of the show after the break, which, speaking of, it's pretty much almost time to go to break.
It is. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have a detailed conversation on Frieda the Cheetah. I'm Jamar Harp with Sports101, and we'll be right back with you.
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came to me.
Me. The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
this decade,
this century,
I will be heard. And
you will be the one to hear me.
And when I am finally heard,
show compassion.
Show compassion.
Show compassion.
Remember, it's in you.
Welcome back. I'm Jamar Harp, and again, this is Sports 101, the sports show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Remember, at Sports 101, we talk about the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective. We also use sport and look at it through the lens of history, in the past, present, and in the making. Make sure you get social with my show and a litany of shows on SportsZone Chicago by following us on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, please download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Again, before we went to break, we were talking about Frieda the Cheetah Gibbs, so now I'd like to fully introduce her and let the world know her story. Frieda Gibbs was born on July 8th, 1963 in Chester, Pennsylvania. As we stated before the break, Chester is on the outskirts of Philadelphia and is an economically depressed area. And oftentimes its crime rate rivals that of any major city in the country. She was given the name Cheetah at school due to her performance on a track team. She's always been a star athlete ever since birth, and grew up hanging around her uncle, who was a Muay Thai fighter, as well as playing basketball, pickup football, and running track with the boys. She used to run fast sometimes because she would get bullied for being a tomboy, and her economic status, wearing run-down clothes, things of that nature. But as a young girl in the 70s, probably due to society and what she was taught, she didn't quite have the courage, or she decided not to fight back at that time. Quick fun fact about Frieda Gibbs is that her high school, Chester High School, named their track team the Cheetahs after Gibbs. This is after she graduated. While at Chester High School, she led them, again, they were a perennial doormat before she got there, and she led them to a division championship in basketball, a district championship, a state semifinal, and she earned all county, all state, as well as all American honors. Excuse me. After high school, she decided to attend Temple University, and she played basketball and ran track, and she received scholarships for both. So again, that announces her athletic prowess. She was such an acclaimed athlete while she was at Temple, and later on she transferred to another institution. She was invited for a tryout for the United States Olympic team. Now, this is the 1980s, so you had the McGee twins, JaVale McGee's mom and her sister. You had Cheryl Miller. You had a lot of great women stars at this time. And from a small school, she was invited to play with them. So that showed you what type of ability that she had. Even though she made it to the tryout, she was cut. And later on, she went on to be an All-American. She ended up transferring from Temple to a smaller school called Cabrini. And again, she was a national All-American. And she left there after she got cut from the United States national team. Again, there's no WNBA at the time, so all the women had to go to Europe. So she began a professional career in Germany. All her years in Germany, she averaged 30 points a game, 15 rebounds, and 10 assists. She got tired of living in Germany and playing basketball, so she came back to the States. And she began instruction in Jeet Kune Do. It's a Aikido fighting style at a Quiet Storm Martial Arts in Chester, Pennsylvania. Now, she was familiar with Quiet Storm Martial Arts because, again, her uncle had worked there, and she grew up there training at Quiet Storm. She started training there in middle school, and she trained there up until she graduated from college. So while she was at Temple, she would take some time off and go to Quiet Storm and train. And then when she transferred to Cabrini, she would do the same thing. She would spend more time there at Cabrini because she didn't run track at Cabrini. She just played basketball. But at Temple, she was on the basketball and track team. And I'm pretty sure that the large nature of Temple's a urban campus. It's in North Philly. Just go up Broad Street, you run right into it. And she wanted some smaller settings. Again, even though she was great, on the field, as she was growing up, she still had to deal with some emotional traumas from where she came from. And again, her economic situation didn't quite change until she went to Germany. She continued to train at Quiet Storm throughout her time in college. She won 3 world championships in Taekwondo by the time she graduated from college. So she will also compete in the off season in Taekwondo tournaments. That was her first martial art. And she won her last world championship in Taekwondo in St. Petersburg, Florida. And she did this against an undefeated woman from Puerto Rico. Throughout all these years she competed, she became a world champion in martial arts. And she also became an All-American in basketball and track. And when she came back from Germany, she decided to move to North Hollywood in 1990 and pursue kickboxing. And this is where, if you remember the first video, we looked at Ruben Urquidez and David Crepes. They trained Benny the Jet, Ruben's brother. He was a famous Muay Thai fighter. And then that's where she got her Muay Thai training. Her training was a little different than Angela Hill's. Again, she was a much larger fighter, and she had a background in martial arts as she was fighting Taekwondo since middle school. So along with her basketball and track abilities, she brought athleticism to Muay Thai that wasn't seen in the women's game. A lot of the spinning moves that you see that are common with men, the roundhouse elbows, the spinning headbutts, the spinning kicks, a lot of women didn't try, but again, Frieda made them part of her regular arsenal due to her athletic ability. During this time, again, she was training, and then she went to Thailand and returned to North Hollywood again to train at the Muay Thai Academy of America. And at this time, she's getting, used to Muay Thai, and she got a record of 16-0-1. Now that's 16 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. The funny thing is the draw was an exhibition and a mixed fight. So a mixed fight is different gender. So she drew against a male fighter. So she was a feared woman fighter at this time. So between 1994 and 2001, she won 3 world championships from 3 different governing bodies. So just like boxing, they had different governing bodies for mixed martial arts. Again, UFC is coming up at this time. So there's a lot of different belts going on. Her first title was in 1994, and that's the ISKA world title. And she earned that with the distinction of the first Black woman to be a champion in Muay Thai. She earned the name the most dangerous woman of the world in an upset in her 1994 fight against the world champion Valerie Waite-Heenan. Valerie Waite-Heenan was called the most dangerous woman in the world, and she was from France. She was a more experienced fighter, and she was supposed to win. Obviously, the marketing went to her in the fight. It was called the Battle of the Masters, and we actually have a quick video of that that we're going to show right now. So let's take a look at that fight, and you can kind of see what she was up against and how she prevailed. Now you can kind of see her moving around, her movement. She's a much more active fighter. The strength and veracity of her kicks. It's a supreme physical condition that Frieda is in. Again, she is fighting the top Muay Thai fighter in the world. Muay Thai fights are always 3 rounds. Again, you can see the power of her punches. So that's a knockout of the world champion. And after this fight, she was known as the most dangerous woman in the world. So that was an achievement not only for African American women, but women of color all over. Again, Muay Thai was dominated by more European women. One reason being at this time, the Muay Thai circuit was supposedly shown in Europe and in Japan. You didn't see a lot of women's Muay Thai fights in the United States. So from 1991, here's a picture with all 3 of her belts. From 1991 and 1997, she amassed a record of 16-0, and this is in Muay Thai. Her other record was in just other mixed martial arts. She was 16-0, and she had 15 knockouts. And again, you just saw the picture with the 3 world titles. So moving forward in her career in 1997, Frieda Gibbs pursued boxing. One of the reasons that me and Maya talked about before is, again, the economics of the situation. UFC is fledgling, is just starting up. Actually, it's probably not even in existence in 1997. She's already came from a professional basketball career in Europe because there's no WNBA. And the Muay Thai that she was fighting, you have to spend money to get to these events. So station yourself in Europe or in Asia for several months will take a lot of your earnings, which are not to begin with. So oftentimes you're making an average salary, and it's not what today's athletes are getting with these big pay-per-view events. So with that and other reasons, and wanting to be closer to the States and come back home, she made the transition to professional boxing. So she had her first professional boxing debut on January 23rd of 1997. This was a 4-round decision over Maria Fortaleza-Recinos. And it wasn't a knockout, but she won in the professional boxing debut. So again, that's tremendous for someone to just keep switching professional sports and excelling in it. We only saw very few athletes do that. Deion Sanders, Brian Jordan, and maybe a few others that played multiple professional sports. But this woman has played basketball. Um, she was a Muay Thai fighter, and now she's a professional boxer. So that's 3 professional sports, and I don't think any man has ever done that. So again, this just shows how competent she is as a tier 1 athlete. Um, Gibbs entered a title fight against Leah Mellinger during this time, and she was also filming the movie Knockout. So if you look at this picture right here, this is a picture from one of her scenes in Knockout. Knockout was a boxing movie, and that's where she got some of her notoriety in the United States. The movie did not show all of her skills because it just showed her boxing. But again, she is an accomplished Muay Thai fighter and very dangerous with her legs and takedowns, things that are illegal in boxing, which again earned her the moniker the Lady Jack Johnson and the most dangerous woman in the world. On January 15th of 1999, she handed Las Vegas hometown favorite Hannah Fox her first loss in a 6-round unanimous decision on ESPN2. So if you can remember, in the late 90s, Friday Night Fights was very popular on ESPN 1 and 2. So she began to get some of that notoriety, and not even being a champion in boxing, she was making equivalent or slightly more money than she made in Muay Thai, where she was the undisputed champion. So that goes to show you the parallels in the sports, as well as how things change in the times. November 16th, 2001, she fought a highly anticipated world title fight against Samaya Anani, and we saw that in the earlier video. And they fought to a draw, which left the 140-pound world title vacant. Again, a lot of her fights were more explosive because at 140 pounds, that's close to what would you call the heavyweight to the men's side. There is a higher division than 140, which is the technical heavyweight, but she's close to that. So she can produce some of the same power that spectators want to see. Remember, everybody goes to these fights to see knockouts. They don't want to see draws or win by points. So she got more money in boxing very quickly for this. They had a rematch on April 28th of 2003, and she was unable to answer the bell for the second round because she broke her hand, and that gave Anani the victory. So again, she broke her hand in 2003. This is after being a professional athlete since the 1980s. So this is a 20-year career, which for any athlete is taxing, and particularly for a woman, because we all know that bodies change and everybody's bones get a little brittle, but in particularly sometimes women lose more bone density than men as they grow in age. So again, following the fight, she announced her retirement, and ever since then, she's worked as an actress. She's been a sports model for Sebastian International Sports Department, so she'll model action photos and websites, and particularly for boxing. She's been featured so many times in her local area under organizations known as Black Achievers, the Black Belt Organization, the Delaware County Times, Inside Karate Magazine, Jet Magazine, the Los Angeles Sentinel, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Sports Illustrated for Women, and Upscale Magazine, because again, she had a successful modeling career after she retired from sports. In 1996, she even expanded her acting and had a cameo on an episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Her fight gear that she fought in, again, she's a local legend in Delaware County. That's the county that Chester, Pennsylvania is in. And she was named to the Sports Hall of Fame. And here is her section in the Hall of Fame, and you can see her belt there. And again, this is dedicated to preserving the history and memory of Delaware County sports legends. So everyone from the county, again, that's on the outskirts of Philadelphia, they want to just make them known and then immortalize them for life. And that's what they've done to Frieda. So just to go over a quick list of her accomplishments from 1986 to 88, she was a 3-time world Taekwondo champion. Again, I didn't list that as a professional sport because sometimes they didn't pay, and athletes will have to pay to get in these tournaments if they didn't have a sponsor. From 1994 to 2001, she was the ISKA World Kickboxing Champion, and she defended her title twice. From 1995 to 99, she was the WKA Kickboxing Champion with 2 title defenses. And remember, said there was 3 organizations. And then from 1996 to 2000, she was a WKC World Kickboxing Champion. So she had 2 defenses there. So with each belt, for 3 belts, she had 6 title defenses and was successful in all of them. From 2015 to 16, she was featured in California due to her works. Again, she would go out and spar with movie stars to get them ready for fights or if they had a physical role. And she became featured in the Orange County Black History Parade. Orange County is a county adjacent to Los Angeles County. And in 2015, she became inducted into the Basketball and Track Hall of Fame at her local high school, which is Chester High School. She began receiving more accolades, which I love because everyone likes to enjoy what they did, and no one would enjoy a posthumous award more if they did it in person. So in 2016, she got an Awakening Outstanding Contribution Award. Again, outside of all the things she's done, she's been a strong advocate against bullying, especially in the inner cities and urban communities. So she goes around and talks about that all the time. She's also a public speaker. In 2016, she also was inducted into the Mickey Vernon Sports Legend Museum. That's a Delaware County museum for Black history and, again, African Americans that come from Delaware County. Her last accolade in 2016, she was selected as the greatest African American female athlete all time in the sport of kickboxing, basically the greatest woman kickboxer of all time due to her accolades. And again, she held 3 belts and defended each one of them twice. Her 2017 belt was inducted into the Hall of Fame in Delaware County, and that's what you saw in the picture. And then she also got an award from the city of Philadelphia, which is, the parent city. As a most outstanding citizen, it was given the key to Chester, Pennsylvania in 2018 by the mayor and city council. So final thoughts on Miss Frieda the Cheetah Gibbs was she entered an arena that was for a Black woman at the time in the 1970s and not only excelled, but she dominated it. She used her prowess not only as a basketball player, but as a track athlete to increase the athleticism of women's mixed martial arts. Again, a lot of the moves that Frieda did, women did not try. She was sort of like the Cerie Bona Lee. If you remember in a previous episode, Cerie Bona Lee was a African or Afro-French figure skater, and she made waves by doing backflips on skates, which a lot of men didn't try, but no women was trying. And with Frieda's athleticism, she brought a lot of moves to the women's game of mixed martial arts and kind of transcended it. Her goal, again, through everything that she's achieved with her personal, her goal is to inspire more women of African descent to be trailblazers and whatever they decide to tackle. So Women's History Month, I would like to leave you with women, if it's a sport, if it's a career, if it's anything that you want and you want to stick your eyes into it, then go do it. Don't let anyone tell you no. And remember, you're just as qualified as anybody else. If you don't get it the first time, try again. But if you really, really want it and you work hard, you'll definitely get it. Before we go, I'd like to mention her autobiography, the Frieda Gibbs story. Here's a picture of her book right here. So again, please go on Amazon and buy this book. It's called The Frieda Gibbs Story, Meet the Most Dangerous Woman in the World. and it's a aspiring story that goes from the 1960s all the way up until now. She had a tremendous journey, and I encourage everyone to get this book. Thank you for tuning in to Sports 101 this week. Again, I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and on Facebook under Jamar Harp. Make sure you get social with Sports 101 and a litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following us on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Again, I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next Wednesday at 9 p.m. as we delve into another episode on Women's History Month featuring trailblazers in America who are African-American women, as well as other women of color, to show their exploits in their particular sports. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
When Toni Stone joined the Negro League's Indianapolis Clowns, she made one thing clear: she refused to play in a skirt. In 1953, Stone became the first woman to regularly play professional men's baseball, replacing Hammerin' Hank Aaron at second base. Stone joined her first all-male barnstorming team at age 16. By 19, she was already playing black baseball full-time. Initially, Stone jumped from one Midwestern team to another, but she soon made semi-pro appearances for black teams in the West and South. Following the integration of Major League Baseball, the Negro League struggled to generate interest and keep talented players. So Indianapolis owner Sid Pollock had Stone replace Aaron, both because Pollock thought she was talented, but also because she could draw crowds. Newspapers noted Stone's sex and sometimes commented on her waist and bust size. She usually dressed in the umpire's room to avoid changing with her teammates. But her on-field talent spoke for itself. Toni Stone just kept on playing.